It's 8:39. Yes, good morning. This is me and her with breakfast.
Absolutely.
Shall we have a look through the papers?
Yes.
Assistant editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu, is here alongside deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Cindy, let's start with the Mail. And this idea that Prigozhin, the boss of Wagner, who's obviously no more, could become a martyr for his supporters, which is obviously...
I think he already is, isn't he?
Yeah, so Wagner soldiers, after the jet crash, have said that they want to take revenge, which is concerning, and that some of them have threatened to storm the Kremlin. So this article is about how Navalny, remember him, the opposition leader who Putin tried to kill and has now got in jail on fraud charges. Navalny basically talks about how at the top of the Wagner group there's this power vacuum. So what is this really well-resourced, well-trained and kind of, quite large mercenary group all around the world going to do leaderless now? Because in that jet, allegedly, was Prigozhin and the second-in-command of the group. So
and other tried and trusted sort of like cabinet members, weren't there?
Yes.
They were all important.
Exactly. So what are they going to do if they think Putin's responsible? There's going to be a power struggle. What is all of this military resources and expertise going to be directed to now? It is quite a scary situation, I think.
It's sort of scary, but wouldn't the West welcome this and Ukraine welcome this? Because if it destabilised Putin...
Yeah, I think Ukraine certainly would welcome this, but I mean, I think if Russia is plunged into a civil war, I mean, from a humanitarian perspective, for the Russian people, this is still a pretty concerning moment. And the problem with, Putin leaving, you just never know who's going to replace him.
Well, no.
So in this kind of...
We've been told many times, be careful what you wish for because there are worse.
Yeah,
on standby.
I think sometimes, there's a bit of hope that Putin will be replaced by some sort of Western-looking liberal reformer. I don't think that's very likely. And, the breakup of Russia, the civil war in Russia is a real possibility because it's not just that you have mercenaries like Wagner. There are all kinds of other private armies operating in Russia. Even I was reading about how, even the defence minister is starting his own army. It's
was crazy.
And you think about how Putin has been using, Chechnyan forces and things like that. So there's lots of warlords around.
Yes.
This is a very scary...
positively medieval,
exactly.
But it was ever thus in Russia, wasn't it? Slovaki and all that sort of business.
Sure, but the problem is now, they're nuclear power.
Well,
this kind of instability in nuclear power in today's environment, I think it is certainly concerning. And it is interesting to know what's going to happen to this mercenary group after, it's only been a few days.
Yeah.
Well, Fraser, you've been looking at the Financial Times, and it's about people who burn the Quran in protest.
So Denmark and Sweden have been rocked by lots of protests with people burning the Quran. Sometimes it's people from the far right doing it to insult Muslims, but sometimes there have been former Muslims, refugees from Iraq and Afghanistan have been burning the Quran in protest at what they see as an oppressive religion. And this has upset the Muslim world. Turkey, in particular, has been essentially playing hardball with these countries. Sweden's entry into NATO was essentially being blocked or slowed down because of these kinds of protests happening in Scandinavia. And the Danish government have now said that we're going to potentially jail people who burn the Quran, which is, a very dark day for free speech. I don't think there's anything big or clever, by the way, about burning the Quran, but... it is. People should accept that that's a legitimate form of protest. People
it's a peaceful protest.
Yeah, people burn flags, people burn Bibles, people burn national symbols, effigies, and that is surely. You would hope that in the West, in Europe, people would stand up for people's right to make their voices heard in that way, and not introduce a kind of essentially a sort of medieval Islamic blasphemy law into Western European countries.
I do disagree with that, actually, Fraser. I think it's medieval to burn things in public. That's the medieval thing. It's not a peaceful protest, really. It's pretty aggressive. If you're going to be burning something that's, important to someone. I'm not religious myself, but I wouldn't think that Christians would like to see the Bible being burned in an explicit denunciation of your religion.
Wouldn't.
I think it's disrespectful.
But you wouldn't be jailed for it.
No, but I mean, to be fair, in the small print, it's a fine to start with, and for repeat offenders, it's jail sentence measured in days, and then for even more, it's up to 2 years.
It is difficult dealing with protest which is deliberately aimed at inflaming certain groups, isn't it?
Literally.
Yes, but I think we do have to recognise that, people have, free speech is not just about being able to say nice things. Everything that's nice is not going to be in trouble from the law. You do have to be able to say outrageous and provocative things. You do have to be able to protest against things that people hold dear to them. Otherwise, free speech is meaningless. And, we're talking about people burning the Bible. I mean, lots of, pop stars or whatever have burnt the Bible on stage in a sort of provocative way.
Oh, yes.
There's all kinds of... we accept that we should be allowed to do artworks portraying Jesus in,
I mean, there are these... I'm sort of in the middle with this. I don't think it's a nice thing to do. But also, in terms of some of these countries which are now demanding places like Denmark take action, well, they're always burning American flags and effigies of presidents.
Exactly, yeah. They're always having, quite... raucous protests about what's going on in the West. Think about some of the stuff against Salman Rushdie, for instance. Some really quite, very violent protests against if we cause offence to them. And I think it is slightly worrying. It is, external forces calling the shots, essentially pressuring Denmark into giving up what I think is important Western liberal value.
I'm still with you on that.
Yeah, I just don't see how it helps. If your problem is with mass immigration in countries like Denmark and Sweden, which presumably some of the problems here are, then there are other ways of doing it than to be explicitly disrespectfful of someone's religion, which is one of the most fundamental things to people, I think, that deeply people believe in. I think burning is a particularly aggressive way of going about it. I'm not talking about publishing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. I think we should be able to do that. That's almost quite passive in a way. But burning, I think the very act of it is really aggressive, especially to do it in front of mosques.
Yes.
They have done.
Oh, it's...
that is explicitly threatening.
OK. Well, your thoughts on that will be welcome. What the hell is this in The Guardian? About South Asian migrant women in the UK fed radioactive bread.
Yeah, this is really, really shocking. And the story, I don't think we know everything about the story just yet, but it's completely shocking in a sense that Warwick University, a researcher, is now trying to track down 20 or so South Asian women who in the 1960s were fed radioactive chapatis to see, basically health results from it. They claim that they didn't know what they were being fed.
Well, I can't understand why they would be being fed radioactive bread. It's sort of pretty obvious.
So Fraser and I were talking about this in the green room, and allegedly it was to see if it would help iron deficiencies. But so much of this is unknown. In the 90s, a documentary was made by Channel 4 about this, and the Medical Research Council did look into it. At the time, they concluded it qualified the consent rules of the time. But since then, they've been strengthened. And the women themselves say that they didn't know what they were eating.
I mean, it's just... utterly scandalous.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
But they did do some very odd things in the names of medical research back in the... Well, I thought it was before the 60s, but...
It was, this was the late 60s. I think, the fact that this was done without their consent is obviously outrageous, but we shouldn't overstate the sort of risks that they were put under. So essentially, the level of radiation we're talking about would be the same as like an X-ray. And people forget that, we are exposed to radiation all the time. Bananas got radiation in them. You go for the equivalent of an X-ray, I think, every time you get on a plane. If you live in Cornwall, you're especially exposed to radiation.
Really?
It's just in the ground or whatever. I don't really understand how it works. And there's a big scandal at the moment. The Fukushima nuclear plant is going to release all of this radiated water into the ocean. But actually, the amount of radiation that's in it, even though it's been used to clean nuclear power plants, is so small that it won't really have any kind of health effects.
Well, no, that's been cleared by the IAEA, hasn't it? Though China's kicking up.
China's kicking up.
You wouldn't necessarily fancy going swimming in it.
You wouldn't fancy it, but it's probably fine. We do have a bit of a, there's something about it. It scares us, doesn't it? Understandably.
Well, yeah. Look, on that note, we've got to leave it, I'm afraid. Cindy, Fraser Myers, it's been good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.